Okay, picture this. You're near a river, maybe the Chiao, just as dawn is breaking. It's quiet, and you start hearing things, whispers, movement, maybe splashing, and you realize it's people. Not just a few, but hundreds, maybe thousands. Families. Crossing a border, they look exhausted, they're looking for safety, driven out by, well, by conflict just over there. This isn't history, this is happening right now. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into a critical unfolding situation. It's the recent, pretty significant influx of Chin refugees into Mizoram in India. We've been looking through the reports, the numbers, trying to grasp the human stories behind it all. Our goal here is to, unpack this complex web. There's conflict, yes, but also incredible compassion and geopolitics too, especially what's happened just in the past week or so.
Yeah, it's definitely a situation that needs a closer look. And it's not just a small movement of people. We're talking large-scale displacement. Since around July 2nd, 2025, we've seen thousands making that really difficult journey from Myanmar into India. So, yeah, we'll explore why now, who are these people, and the response they're getting in Mizoram, which is honestly quite remarkable.
It really is. So let's start right there on the ground. What are the numbers telling us about this latest wave? And I mean, how reliable are these figures when things are moving so fast?
Well, the latest estimates, they point to roughly 3,000 to 4,000 Chin refugees arriving, specifically since that July 2nd date. But you're right about precision. It's incredibly hard to get exact real-time numbers in, active border areas like this, especially with conflict nearby. So you might see reports saying over 3,000, others may be closer to 4,000. The key thing, though, is the scale. It's thousands. These families, they're mainly coming into Mizoram's Champhai district. Places like Zokalthor, Vafai, those are key entry points, often crossing the Tiao River, which is the border there. It's dangerous. We've even heard heartbreaking reports of at least one person drowning trying to cross.
Gosh, that really drives home the risks they're taking. So once they get across, what happens? Is there immediate help, shelter, or are they just stranded?
No, they're not just left stranded. And that's where you see Mizoram's response kick in almost immediately. Many find shelter with relatives right away, which tells you something about the connection between the Chin and the Mizo people. We can get into that. But beyond family ties, local schools, community halls, they're quickly opened up as temporary shelters. And this is driven by the local villagers themselves working alongside NGOs. It's a real grassroots humanitarian effort from the get-go, providing that immediate safety net.
Okay, so that's the immediate picture, but what's causing this? What's the underlying turmoil in Myanmar driving people out? How does the 2021 coup fit in?
Right. The big picture context is definitely Myanmar's ongoing instability since the military coup back in February 2021. That coup didn't just overthrow the government, it sparked widespread resistance movements all over the country. It basically plunged Myanmar into this protracted civil conflict. But interestingly, this specific wave of displacement, the one happening right now, isn't directly caused by the junta's actions at this moment. It's more complex.
Okay, that's important. If it's not the junta directly pushing them out right now, who is involved? Which groups are clashing that's causing this specific surge across the border?
So the groups involved in the fighting that's directly triggering this displacement are the Chin National Defence Force, the CNDF, and the Chinland Defence Force-Hualngoram, or CDF-H. Now, both of these are technically part of the wider People's Defense Force network, the groups resisting the military junta. So what we're seeing is essentially infighting, internal conflict within the resistance movement itself. One source described it pretty vividly as a family feud, but with guns and drones.
Wow, a family feud with guns and drones. That's quite an image. What does that mean for ordinary people caught in the middle? How does that specific fight push people out?
It's incredibly difficult for the civilians. These two groups, CNDF and CDF-H, while they share the goal of fighting the junta, they've ended up clashing with each other. Seems to be over strategic areas, maybe control. The key detail here, the trigger for this recent exodus, is that the CNDF has reportedly overrun all 8 of the CDF-H camps in that area. So imagine you're a civilian there. The groups supposedly fighting for you are now fighting each other right where you live. It creates this immediate new danger. That's what's forcing these thousands to flee across the border right now. It's like escaping one layer of conflict only to be caught in another.
And it makes geographic sense, too, doesn't it? Chin State is right there, bordering India, a huge border over 500 kilometers long with Mizoram. It's the obvious escape route.
Exactly. Geography plays a huge role. Chin State in northwestern Myanmar, it's always been a center of resistance, and that long, porous border with Mizoram is the most direct path to relative safety for people fleeing the violence there. But yeah, as we said, it's not an easy journey. Rough terrain, that dangerous river crossing.
Which brings us to Mizoram's response, which, as you said, has been remarkable, really open arms, even though the state faces its own challenges. Why Mizoram? What's behind this welcome?
It really comes down to this incredibly deep connection between the Chin people from Myanmar and the Mizo people in India. They share linguistic roots, very similar cultures, traditions. Many share the Christian faith. It's almost like, well, like family helping family cross an international line. So it's not just charity, it's solidarity rooted in this shared identity. That's why Mizoram feels like such a natural, welcoming haven.
And it's not the first time, is it? Mizoram was already hosting a huge number of refugees before this latest group arrived. How does a state, relatively small in population, manage that? It's like a sanctuary for multiple groups.
You're absolutely right. Mizoram, with just over 1.2 million people, was already shouldering a massive responsibility. Before this influx, they were already hosting over 30,000 refugees from Myanmar from previous waves of conflict, plus around 2,000 people who came from Bangladesh a couple of years ago. And then you also have Kuki-Zo people from Manipur seeking safety there because of the troubles in their state. It's like adding more guests to an already very full house party, and the host is doing their absolute best. They're even planning, I think this month, July 2025, a biometric enrollment drive just to better manage and support the 32,000 plus Myanmar refugees already there. That kind of effort shows a real commitment, despite the immense strain.
Given that strain, what's the official line from the Mizoram government about these newest arrivals? Is there pressure to, send them back?
No, not at all. The government there, led by Chief Minister Loduhoma, has been very clear and frankly very humane. They've explicitly said they haven't asked anyone to return because they know how dangerous it is back in Myanmar right now. The state's interior minister, Kesap Danga, put it very directly. He said something like, "The fighting is beyond our control. People have come in, and on humanitarian grounds, we have to provide drinking water, food, and shelter." It's a stance that really prioritizes people's lives.
And it's not just the government, is it? The community effort sounds incredible. Groups like the Young Mizo Association, the YMA, and church committees like MKHC, how do they mobilize so effectively?
It's this powerful combination of, yes, the shared culture and history, but also really strong community organizations, the YMA, church groups. They have deep roots and extensive networks throughout Mizoram. They can mobilize volunteers and resources very quickly. They're often the first ones on the scene, setting up relief camps, organizing food drives, distributing aid. It's genuine grassroots solidarity. They tap into that existing social fabric. That's the backbone of the immediate response, making sure people have the basics and feel welcomed.
So, looking forward then, the compassion is undeniable, but there have to be challenges. What are the longer-term strains on Mizoram, and what does this situation maybe tell us about the wider international response, or lack thereof?
The biggest challenge, absolutely, is the strain on resources. Healthcare, education, infrastructure, sanitation, everything gets stretched incredibly thin. You have a state population of just over 1.2 million trying to support now likely well over 40,000 displaced people in total, if you count everyone from Myanmar, Bangladesh, and Manipur. It puts immense pressure on the state budget and local services. It really highlights how the burden of these crises often falls heaviest on the immediate neighbors, the border regions. And, without more substantial, consistent support, even the biggest heart can be overwhelmed eventually.
And security must be a concern too, right? That long, porous border. The fighting in Myanmar could potentially spill over.
Definitely. It's a major concern. That 510-kilometer border is hard to fully secure. We know the Assam Rifles, who guard the border, have increased their presence. They even temporarily sealed the main border gate at Zokatha recently. But people driven by desperation will find ways across. And there have been reports, quite concerning ones, of injured fighters from the CDF-H actually receiving medical treatment in Mizoram. That adds a whole other layer of complexity and potential security risks. Preventing spillover is a constant challenge.
Which leads to the question of policy. It sounds like a lot of this is happening through goodwill and sort of ad hoc measures. Is there a push for something more formal, a proper refugee policy? Because this scale seems unsustainable without one.
Yes, that's exactly right. Civil society groups in Mizoram, especially the Central Young Mizo Association, the CYMA, they've been advocating strongly for this. They're pushing for a comprehensive state-level policy for displaced persons. Something that would formalize things like shelter locations, aid distribution standards, registration processes. Because right now, with over 42,000 displaced people from different conflicts sheltering in the state, the current ad hoc system, while incredibly humane, just isn't built for the long haul. A formal policy would bring much-needed structure and sustainability.
And where does the international community fit into this? Is enough help coming from outside, from organizations like the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR?
Well, international organizations like UNHCR are present and providing some support, but the general sense from the reports is that it's not nearly enough. Mizoram is essentially managing a major regional humanitarian crisis, largely on its own resources and the goodwill of its people. More international aid is desperately needed. But beyond aid, there needs to be more focus on the root cause of sustained diplomatic pressure and efforts to find some kind of peaceful resolution to the conflict within Myanmar itself. Because until that happens, people will likely keep needing to flee, and Mizoram will continue to face this immense pressure.
Reflecting on all this, what really strikes me is how this relatively small state, Mizoram, is acting like such a huge beacon of hope. It truly seems to have a massive heart, despite all the difficulties.
It absolutely does. It's an extraordinary display of compassion and resilience. The government, the local communities, the NGOs, their efforts are literally saving lives. It's a powerful example. But, as we've discussed, it also underscores the vulnerability. Their generosity is being tested to its limits. The immediate response is vital, but the long-term solution has to involve addressing the conflict that's driving people away in the first place.
So just to recap, we've looked at this specific recent surge of Chin refugees, driven by this internal clash between resistance groups, the CNDF and CDF-H. We've seen Mizoram's incredible welcome, built on deep cultural ties, but straining under the weight of hosting tens of thousands already. And we've touched on the urgent need for more support, for formal policies, and ultimately for peace in Myanmar. It really makes you think, doesn't it? This small state, Mizoram, with its big heart holding the line, what does it mean for a region, for its people, to constantly absorb this level of human suffering? And maybe what's our role as a global community, not just in sending aid, but in genuinely working towards stability? How do we support those on the front lines of these crises? And yeah, it's something to really ponder long after this deep dive is over.